All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with David DeLaitsch, Victoria Chavez. It's January 28th, 2025. We're at Fullerton Wines in Corvallis. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And the first question, as you probably know, is why wine?
Why wine? Well, I guess that's a long story for both of us because it is my probably third career,
Yeah,
three and a half.
My at least second.
Yeah.
Is what you count as a career. So.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Texas. Have a bachelor's in chemical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. And I went into oil and gas as an environmental engineer and learned that that really wasn't how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And I moved to California after working in the oil and gas field for about 4 years and got into environmental commodities trading. And really interesting to learn that industry as well, but just didn't, wasn't my cup of tea. But I was in San Francisco. I was in the Bay Area, so I was always going up to Napa and Sonoma to wine taste and learn more. And actually, my dad planted the seed of, hey, because I'd expressed some unhappiness in the job and wished I could get a little bit more back to the science. I was in straight financial district in San Francisco, so. Planted the seed of, hey, you could go get your master's at UC Davis and in winemaking, since you seem to love wine so much and love learning about wine and, going up to Napa and Sonoma and tasting wine. And so through that, I just started thinking more about it. And in 2017, I decided, okay, let's go for it. Let's quit this career in the energy industry and got a job with a company called Fruition Sciences and worked out in the vineyards, putting up, these contraptions to measure sap flow, to learn how the vine uses water. And so that was a really good first, I guess, job in the wine industry. Kind of really got me back to the science of things. But I knew I wanted to go back to get my master's at Davis. So I had some prereqs to complete, more on the biology side since I had all the chemistry and stuff. So I was working on my prereqs for Davis and got a job at Beaulieu Vineyard in the tasting room. So I learned that side of things as well. And got a job at Gallo in Modesto for 6 months. I guess these were all internships, but and learned, the big commercial side of things as well. And then finally went to Davis, got my master's, and so that's my story.
That's amazing. All right, we'll come back and I have a lot of questions about that. David, what's the same question to you?
Yeah, I guess going back for me, my exposure to wine growing up in Wisconsin, outside of Madison, was almost zero. I remember we'd always get a glass of super sweet something at Christmas, and it was terrible. And actually just recently coming from Christmas with family in the Green Bay area, and I think they serve cherry
raspberry
twist from Door County or something. So my parents, I think, drank relaxed Riesling or something, buy it and drink it as soon as you get home. So really didn't have much exposure to that, but being from Wisconsin is a huge beer state, and plenty of exposure to that. So I always thought, as I started studying, same as Victoria, loved sciences, got into biochemistry for my undergrad, was this is pretty cool. I was in the undergraduate homebrewing club, loved beer, but always as a hobby passion, I guess. I mean, it's something you drink, not something you do, and that's just my impression. Never thought about wine. And graduated, double majored in biochemistry and Spanish. So wanted to work in pharmaceuticals, did the whole MCAT deal, was pretty quickly aware that wasn't for me. And I always say if you studied biochemistry at Madison, you're either going to med school or you're making booze. And I did the MCAT deal and was no, clearly not. Shadowed some doctors and they're all just unhappy. I was I don't know. I guess I studied Spanish. So I moved to Spain. I remember quitting my job, and my boss is like, "Can I ask where you're going? Is it a competitor? What are you doing?" I was like, "I think I'm just gonna move to Spain." Sounds fun. I was 23, I had the travel bug. Loved foreign language. Ended up out there, taught English for a year in Castilla-La Mancha, which is in the huge La Mancha region, kind of like Central Valley version of Spain, where they just do a ton of production. And I met so many people. I had a great time. People were like, "You love Spain, you love," I mean, for lack of better words, like partying and drinking wine, and had all this exposure to cheap wines that were very good. Didn't have that exposure ever in my life. I was like, wow, this is like actually drinkable and quite fun. And they're like, you can study winemaking as a degree, a master's degree in Spain, super cheap. You get a student visa for 2 more years, and you can just keep living in Spain and practice your Spanish. And I kind of thought, well, okay, you know, I don't know, I had to tell Victoria if it was like a half-day decision or something, and I just enrolled and was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna study wine.
Because you said you wanted to really master Spanish, and you'd been teaching English, and
exactly. At this point,
more
like
about
wine
the
is
language, yeah.
still like a side effect, right? Like it's more about like, hey, this will be really cool. I'll be 25. I'll have my master's degree. I was kind of had that push, like, hey, get a higher education, and was kind of like done with it after undergrad. So I was like, well, this will check that box. It'll allow me to like continue to live in Spain and kind of like bum around Euro travel as a 20-something-year-old. And like worst case, I'll be 25, fluent in Spanish, know a ton about wine. Like no one will have to be the wiser. I can always go back and work my old job. So that's the intro to a long story of getting into wine, but kind of went from something that I never thought about. I do remember, I'm gonna say I was 21 for the record, I don't actually know, but buying like all the Trader Joe's like $3 chucks of different varieties and being like, I'm gonna figure this out. Like I got a Trader Joe's like Pinot Noir, I got a Cabernet, I'm sure they all taste exactly the same. Like they probably still do now, but they definitely did when I was that age. Yeah. And being like, I just don't get it. To kind of like understanding a little bit more and starting to learn, and just thought that was like, hey, this is like really cool, I could actually do this.
Well, Spain's a really good place to get into it.
So both of you have a master's in wine. So Victoria, I'll start with you. Talk about your experience at Davis, coming into it from the scientific background, but not necessarily a wine passion background. So tell me about learning wine from that perspective and what the experience was like for you at Davis.
Yeah, so I guess by the time I had entered Davis, I had a couple of jobs in wine and really had developed that passion for wine and tasted a lot of wines. So, and it was really great for me to have, I think, that break from undergrad to my master's. I came into my master's with more of a professional background. I took it more seriously, I think. And I just took advantage of everything that it had to offer. I really enjoyed the program there at Davis. It was a small master's program. I believe it was 14 of us. So we got pretty close, so I started in 2019, fall of 2019. Well, March of 2020 rolls around, and we had to complete our winter quarter finals online. And then, everything else was online. So I still really enjoyed it, but due to COVID, it was a different experience. Luckily, so Davis has 2 master's program. One, just kind of normal, you write a thesis, you do research. The other is a professional, like business, science master's degree. I chose that route. So my program, I was always going to do an internship my second year in the fall. So I think that was good for me in that, everything wasn't just behind a computer. I still worked that harvest of 2020. And that's actually when I met David. I had started my harvest at Colgan Cellars, and they are very, very high end. And because of the fires in Napa that year, they decided not to make wine. And I was like, well, this is for my master's program. I probably should make wine, I have to write a report about this. So I started looking for other jobs and ended up at Cardinal for the rest of my harvest. But through that search, I had reached out to somebody that I knew in the field, our now very good friend Craig, and he was like, helping me out, and he said, do you want to just come hang out with me and my coworkers tomorrow? And said, okay, yeah, I'm always, looking to meet new people, and it ended up being Craig, his wife Danny, and David.
She literally had no other options.
Yeah.
It was great. But it was like small COVID get together,
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And David and Craig had worked together at Isley that harvest, so that's how they knew each other.
Tell me about your experience in graduate school.
Yeah, so doing graduate school in Spain, like I said, was largely, I just thought it would be super cool to get immersed in Spanish, and I thought it'd be a real challenge, and I was like, this would be something that would be hugely beneficial going back. Like, I'm never gonna look back and wish I didn't know Spanish. And I didn't come from a Spanish-speaking background or anything. It was just classroom studies. And then when I went to teach English, I was like, well, I'm not really in Spain to teach English. I don't want to talk in English all the time. It's not really helping me progress. So I enrolled. First day, we went out and harvested, and my wine vocabulary, I have classroom vocabulary of Spanish at this point. I didn't know any of the words, right? So I was kind of they're telling me to, pick different grapes and all these different words related to the different tools you use that are specific, and me kind of just looking at them But I think the difference studying in a European country as opposed to the US is there's just so much more understanding about not knowing the language, because they had other students. We had a couple students from France that were there, a student from Germany. I wasn't the only non-native speaker. Super nice about that. And they're just very easygoing people. It's not an issue. You try your best. And it was 2 months of that, and I was just super fluent, because you are completely immersed, just dumping words on you. And some of them, I've told this story many times, but one of the words was basukeo, and that's what they use for a pigeage or a punch down. And I was I have no idea what we're talking about, right? I don't even know what a punch down is, because this is the first week of class. So I'm in my Spanish-English dictionary, word reference, looking up basukeo, and the word means to shoot a bazooka. And I'm I'm pretty sure that's not what we're doing. I have no idea, because what a niche word, right? You have to look in a wine dictionary if that exists, much less a bilingual one. So it kind of formed that whole, I started learning words I only knew in Spanish, and I didn't know what they were in English. Victoria reminds me I didn't know what a sump was in winery terms. I only knew what it was in Spanish words. So super interesting. Master language had no problem really with the language portion. The part that really tripped me up was we're doing stuff in liters and hectoliters and centigrade and grams, and luckily enough of a scientific background to catch up on that, but I don't know how many kilometers an hour you drive your tractor to cover 1 hectare of land planted with however many vines per hectare, right? That was just and how many milliliters per hour you're spraying to cover the vine. That was just so beyond anything I could grasp. I was I don't know. How much does a bunch of grapes weigh? I don't know, 800 grams? No, not even close, So, there were some real challenges. I met some super cool people, people from Burgos region, kind of the Ribera del Duero, some Rioja people, lots of Castilla-La Mancha. I actually studied in Valencia. So added perk of I lived 2 blocks from the Mediterranean. I was 24, 25, go lay on the beach and then have classes about wine in the afternoon. So was a pretty pretty soft landing into adulthood, I would say, out of college. But yeah, that was studying my master's, and I guess, like I was saying earlier, I went from kind of no understanding of wine, just thought it was cool or interesting, and this whole world you haven't discovered, so you're learning a ton, to doing my studies and being that was super cool. I liked what I learned. Okay, sounds good. Still not a job. But like I said, I learned Spanish, and I was super focused on languages, and I was kind of after my first year, I'm I kind of feel I've learned Spanish to a point where I'm really happy. I'm fluent, conversational, dreaming in Spanish. Is there any way I could go to another country to do my internship? And they're we have great contacts in Bordeaux. Yeah, that would be awesome. I was okay, I guess I'm going to Bordeaux. It was really just 1 day at a time. Okay. Got in some veterinary student's car that was driving home to Bordeaux, kind of tried to speak Spanish to each other on the way, and ended up in Bordeaux, and I was working in Pomerol at Chateau Petit Village The winemaker there is a Spanish woman who actually married into the Berway family, who has been winemaker at Petrus, and she's now the winemaker at Chateau Le Pin. Pretty like, went from like $3 bottles and I'd spoil myself and get a €5 one, to I was drinking like 200, 300 euro bottles of Bordeaux. And I was, still in that age where I'm like mind blown because I'm eating like tortellini with like the leftover tasting room wine. So it went from like, this is cool and fun to like, this is cool and like a viable career. And I went from like, I really like wine to like, I love wine, right? Because you're surrounded by like first grows, this history, this type of like international exposure. There are people from all over the world working in wineries around me. People from Argentina, from Australia, from South Africa, from Germany, like working in all these wineries. And Pomerol is a small place. Every little chateau is a couple hectares, and they're all next to each other. So we all get together and hang out, and it was just having a blast, getting to taste some really cool and historic wines of significance. And I guess that kind of, I don't know how to say like rounded out my studies, but when I came back to Spain, one, I could no longer remember Spanish because I only learned French and was like trying to figure out which words were Spanish and which ones were French, and went back and did my second year there. I don't know how much further you want to go into this. This led to an internship in New Zealand.
Please.
Yeah, okay. So this is still part of my studies, right? So I had 2 years of studies, one curricular internship and one extracurricular internship is what they called it. The study, I don't know, the credits and the system's a little bit different, but you still end up with a master's degree that's recognized internationally. So as my second internship, I went to New Zealand, and I worked at Clos Henri, which is in Marlborough. And I ended up there because the winemaker in Bordeaux had a connection. Her husband's very good friend was the winemaker at Clos Henri. Worked there making Sauvignon Blanc because I'd only made red wines in Bordeaux, largely Merlot cab-based wines. It's like, well, it'd be good to know how to make white wine. So I went to New Zealand where they make a ton of white wine. Had a great time there too, but I was just like coming from such a weird angle where I was like this American that didn't know the words in English, and it just kind of like showed up with a backpack and was like, hey guys, like I got like $4 to my name, and I was just like in Bordeaux, I was like just at Petrus last week, and kind of came at it from that angle. But then you can meet this whole backpacker community in New Zealand, which kind of exposed me to like, it's not just like wine that allows you to travel internationally. It's like all these different people, super international again, met a lot of like great people, super interesting stories, got to do lots of like hiking, fishing, all that type of stuff in New Zealand, and had a blast doing it. So I really enjoyed the wine portion of it, but at that point I was kind of like, still on the backpacker, traveler type of mentality, which you see persists through the rest of the story until I met Victoria and got me a little bit more grounded in reality. So I was down there, and I still had, the visa I had was a 2-year European visa as a student. And I had learned French pretty well in 6 months, but I was like, I can still learn French a little bit better. I met a lot of French people backpacking, and they're like, oh, you don't speak French, you're just you need a little bit of French, but not really. So I was like, I'd like to learn it much better. That was my goal traveling. I still had this student visa, and it was in Bordeaux. I was like, it would be awesome to go to Burgundy. I don't know anybody in Burgundy. So I look up decanters, like top 5 best Burgundy producers. Like, I think on their list that year, number 1 was Armand Rousseau. I sent them a message, and they replied, and they're like, sure, you can be our intern. Like, no concept of the significance, because my family isn't a wine cellar, was never exposed to this. Like, was like, asked one of my buddies, I'm like, I don't know, you think this is a good idea? Like, should I really? Like, I'm having so much fun in New Zealand. I got a year visa. Should I go? And he's like, are you kidding me, man? Like I will never be able to try those wines in my life. They're so like, wait list for 15 years to try their village wine type of thing. So went out there, and they're just like very friendly, normal people. That's what they say about Burgundy. It's like farmers like that happen to acquire this wealth, but they're still farmers. Whereas Bordeaux's a lot more Napa, kind of like investment, wineries. Wouldn't you say that?
Research.
Yeah, research based. Whereas like, someone's basement could have a couple of tanks like this in Burgundy. So yeah, really like kind of went from like Spain drinking like €3 bottles that I thought were really good to Bordeaux, and then I went to Burgundy drinking like 80s magnums of Armand Rousseau, and just like we were picking grapes, and the guy next to me was wearing a Rolex. And I'm just like, what happened in my life to bring me to this point? Super thrilled, like had a wonderful experience. Cyril and Eric and all the Rousseaus, super nice to me. I did learn much more French, although they have a very different accent in Burgundy. And then they'd always make jokes. I don't know if it's like the rivalry. They're like, where'd you learn French? And I say, oh, Bordeaux. And they're like, what were you doing in Bordeaux? I said, I did my first internship there. And they'd be like, well, why'd you do a winemaking internship? They don't even make wine there. Why you should have come to Burgundy. I'm like, well, I'm here now, okay? So, and then after that came to an end, I was done with my European visa. I was kind of like, I don't really know what to do. Like, how do you top that experience, right? And they were kind enough to recommend Australia to me. So I had a connection at Moraduck Estate. And seriously wonderful, wonderful people. I don't think I ever really had Australia on my map as a place I wanted to go. And I had an incredible time with these Australians. They're lots of fun. They make fantastic wine. There's lots of Pinot being made down there. I should mention at this point, I had done Pinot across New Zealand, Burgundy, and then to Southern Australia and the Mornington Peninsula. Was really getting into that. And if you get a Rousseau recommendation to go somewhere, you should go there. I would say that. Wonderful time, but February 2020. So got 2 months into it, and Australia locked down hard, way harder than we did here. At this point, I hadn't really been in the US in 5 years either. I was just kind of showed up with a backpack again, was like, hey guys, pretty excited to be here. And they're like, were you seriously at Armand Rousseau? Are you pulling our leg about this? I was like, no, it's really cool. And they're like, okay, do you want to make the wine this year? I'm like, nah, I would rather learn and hang out with you guys. So, but they make wonderful wine. I actually learned a ton about winemaking because you kind of go from this this is the way we've always do it, so that's the way it's done, to a more I don't know what you say.
Richard was a doctor and came from it from a research and science perspective.
So Richard McIntyre had his PhD and was a former surgeon, and then his daughter Kate is a master of wine. So awesome place to learn about winemaking. Jeremy, the winemaker there, was super helpful and really gave me the I can do this myself. They let me make some wine out of some super mildewy grapes that had tons of VA and was terrible, but I actually got to do it. I was like, this is something I can do. And COVID shut it down, and I really just kind of bonded with them. I wasn't really allowed off the farm. They kept me there. They supported me, but at a certain point, I was and again, going into this, I was like, I'm gonna work vintage, and I'm gonna go scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef. That's my plan. That sounds awesome. But it kind of went to, I'd feel pretty bad. I've been home in 5 years. I should go be with my family if something were to happen. Got back. Didn't see the rest of my 20s ticking away in rural Australia anyway, so came back, a couple months with my family. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. So found a job in Napa because that was all I knew, and that's where I met Victoria. I guess that's quite a long trip around the world, 2-3 times over before I found Victoria. But then when we met, I would say that I was like, oh, we can do that. We can do this. I'm gonna get some grapes and do it again. It was so much fun.
When we met, you were very excited about this Chardonnay that you were making in a storage unit.
Hey, this girl that I just met, you want to second date at my winery? She's like, okay, you're making wine, that's pretty, I'm into that. Let's check it out.
It's a 5 foot by 5 foot storage unit.
Temperature controlled storage unit, very important in the white winemaking. I shouldn't put them on the record. Napa Wine Storage is for people to store their wine, but
very expensive wine, not make wine there.
That's what I was storing. I said a couple barrels of wine. It wasn't technically wine yet.
Yeah.
So that is garage yeast in the purest
That was
form.
kind of Spearhunter's first vintage, almost. It was 2020 in a storage unit.
Got some free grapes because of the fires. Again, wasn't the highest quality or anything to seriously write home about, but made very correct and the type of wine that you're I can do this, and it gave us a lot of confidence. And Victoria coming off her master's was kind of I think there's often an attitude, especially in a place like Napa, where it's you have to work for 10 years before you can't just do it. Mm-hmm. Whereas coming from France, they're farmers, and they're like, oh, wine makes itself. Like, you're not a winemaker because you're not a yeast man. Like, that's what they told me. Like, imagine thinking you make the wine, you know? I was like, okay, like, I guess I just studied this for 4 years for nothing. So, so very different attitudes and approaches.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you said when we met, I kind of grounded you, and it was kind of the opposite. You kind of, I guess, grounded me because I was still finishing my master's when we met, and I had only worked in Napa. So my first harvest was at Kiever with Jason Kiever as the director of production and Celia Welch as the consulting winemaker. And then my second harvest was at Gallo. And so I'd only worked, and then Colgan and Cardinal. So I'd only worked in California, I guess. And when we met, I was still in my master's program, and I had this opportunity to go abroad through a scholarship. And you were like, you have to go to France. You have to go to France. So
I was trying to sell you on Burgundy too.
In Burgundy, yeah, specifically Burgundy. And so I had finished my master's in 2021, but through, Davis was lucky enough to get an internship at Domaine Leflevre in Pouligny-Montrachet, and that was all of kind of you pushing me, like, go do this, and that was an amazing experience as well.
Admit, like, guilty as a reformed wine snob. I think when you get through Bordeaux, Burgundy, we went to Champagne too, you end up just kind of probably being a headache for other people that want to drink wine with you because you're talking about all this stuff all the time. And I very much, it was a great learning experience because you're trying lots of cool stuff and you want to talk about it all the time. But man, looking back, you're like, wow, I did a lot of talking about wine, and all these cool things that I did. And then went to Napa, and coming off these 3-4 Pinot harvests, and we're working I'm working in Calistoga on a super hot year. It's 110 when we picked the cab. It was
and there was 2 fires.
Crazy high bricks. They'd dump a bunch of water into it. It still ends up 16.5+%, and I'm undrinkable, actually undrinkable wine. Again, coming from a light-bodied, low-alcohol Pinot drinker. And Victoria's telling me about all these places she worked in, they all make terrible wine. We don't even want to drink this for 20 years. Again, like I said, a little dramatic, but I was like, you gotta go to Burgundy. You'll love it. It'd be great.
Yeah, and I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Making Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Pinot too.
Lucked into one of the premier Chardonnay places, and so we went back and we visited old friends there and kind of had a pretty cool experience.
That was an amazing experience too, because not only was I interning there, but we were, in Burgundy. So on the weekend we went to Champagne, and, we went to Bordeaux to visit all of your friends, and then after that internship finished, we went to Spain for 3 weeks and did kind of a little wine tour around Spain. And ended in Turkey, which actually we tasted some pretty good sour cherry wine in Turkey.
Then I don't know if you want to get into the start of Spearhunter at all. Please. And kind of how that got going. I know that was maybe a little bit more background than people anticipate, but
that's the whole point here, is all the background. So please, that's excellent.
Cool.
Actually, before we move into Spearhunter, tell me, I'm always curious about sort of first harvest impressions and experiences. So Victoria, I'll start with you. First harvest, what was it like?
The first harvest, people had warned me about harvest. They said, harvests are rough. It's long hours and hard work. And it was. I think I was really lucky where I, got my first harvest experience, Kiever Vineyards. They're a smaller boutique winery, and so I got to see kind of everything, do everything. Whereas I think if I was at a bigger winery, I would have been kind of pigeonholed into one job that whole harvest. So I was very lucky. They're great people, to work with. And Celia Welch, the consulting winemaker, is, amazing, so knowledgeable. And they make really good wine. So they made Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc. Really, really good Sauvignon Blanc too. So it was, but it was long hours. It was, 12-hour days, and spilling wine all over myself, not knowing what I'm doing, and learning how to drive a forklift, and But it's funny because coming into that, I had actually worked in the vineyards before, which is rough too. You're out in the heat and just walking a lot, and there's no bathroom in the vineyards, so.
And coming from the high rise in San Francisco, what did you think?
Well, yeah, coming from the high rise in San Francisco, it was a little bit different.
Victoria said she just decided she would rather work way harder for way less money.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what about it made you want to keep doing it?
I think, I had worked in the oil and gas industry, and at the end of the day, I guess you end up with oil and gas, but, and then environmental commodities trading was kind of just making money to make money. But with winemaking, at the end of the day, you get this. You get, a bottle of wine that you get to share with family and friends and enjoy. And it's just, I don't know, more tangible, I think, which I love.
There's a huge amount of satisfaction to be said for finishing with something you can physically hold in your hands. I remember a friend telling me that New Zealand and that kind of being like a lost art or a lost, form of satisfaction in people that work, where if you're just like working all day and you go home, you don't have anything to show for it really other than money in your bank account. It's just a different form of satisfaction and fulfillment.
And I think so. I think I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and working at Valero, I'm never gonna own Valero, and working, at DT Energy, I'm never gonna own DT Energy. And so I think that was also another goal of mine, was to like own something for myself. And with winemaking, I really saw that happening, and I think that's why I love winemaking, but I think that's also why I got into winemaking, was I really wanted to have my own business and be able to come home at the end of the day with my own bottle of wine.
Mm-hmm. Well, that does lead perfectly into talking about Spearhunter. So let's talk about you kind of talked about the very early origin story of Spearhunter. Tell me about after 2020, where it goes from there.
So 2020, we took the pause so Victoria could finish her internship, the 2021 harvest in France. Coming back from that, we had left Napa kind of
knowing we didn't want to stay in Napa.
Internships, I wasn't in love with the wine, you could say. And the cost of living is absurd for someone making a low hourly wage. And I don't know how it's sustainable. And I think there's a fair amount of people in the wine industry that come into it from a very different financial background than someone from Lubbock or from the upper Midwest, where those dollars count a lot and you can barely afford to live. And it just it kind of was soul sucking for me a little bit, just like making these wines, and I can't even hope to buy them, much less want to. And I'm worried about living and all this cool stuff I was doing. I was traveling around the world and doing all this fun stuff with dollars in my pocket. Now I'm worried about I gotta go to work. Our work's on fire, but should I go? I kind of need to get paid. Way back into the whole American capitalism thing. So, so I guess California had definite pros and cons for us. But when we went to France, we knew we wanted to look to do something else.
Before we went to France, we had actually kind of traveled around different places in California. So we went up to Mendocino.
We were kind of looking for a Pinot place. I was just so passionate about it. I'm if I want to be making wine, I want to at least be making Pinot.
Yeah, and we actually came up to Oregon. It's funny, we didn't come up to the Willamette Valley, but we went to Bend, and we loved it. And really, I think we were just okay, Oregon, that's the next place for us.
Why are we not living here? This place is awesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, when we went to France, everybody is if you're going to make Pinot in America, you have to go to Oregon.
They said wine. It's the only place making good wine in America. And when you're looking at starting a brand, and when you're looking at starting a brand, I had done 5 internships. You'd done a handful of internships as well at this point. You're kind of looking at getting a full-time job, which is generally entry level, and kind of felt like I had more to offer than just working an entry level job. and then also had the drive and I think just like a fierce independence from my lifestyle at that point where like I was just a bad worker, right? Like I'd go to work and be like, why am I doing this? This is just like killing the clock, you know what I mean? I say like I would have fired me. Like it's just a different attitude. And at that point I was like, I'd go into work and I'd bring my storage unit Chardonnay samples to the Foss so I could run them and like spend the whole time thinking about what I was going to do with my wine, you know? It was just kind of like there for a paycheck.
I think you discovered doing it for yourself. You were a really good worker. He is just, sometimes I'm like, I'm ready to go home. And you're like, no, we got to keep doing this.
Yeah, and then there's the whole like, you know, a lot of places that, you know, you'll spend the whole time making the wine with help from the yeast. And then the owner, who in Napa is generally some CEO of a bank or some very wealthy fund or whatever, puts their name on it, and you're like, ouch. You know, it like almost hurts. You know, you're like, put my name on the wine, and then they can see their name in the store, and then they tell you that like the wine's too expensive for you to try, and you're like, brutal, right? Yeah. Like it was tough.
So when we moved to Oregon, we had the goal of starting our own wine label.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so actually you have your main job is government subcontracting, so that's how he makes money, because starting a wine label, you don't make any money.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of thought that went into it, and I think the thought was kind of like, should we do this? Like everyone that I've ever talked to talks about how like, you know, the thing you've heard a million times is like, to make a small fortune in wine and start with a large fortune. Well, we start with 0. You know, like where do you go from here?
Yeah. But I still wasn't ready to, because I had just gotten my master's and, you know, had this internship in France, and I wasn't ready to give up kind of working in wine yet. And so I got a job here in Oregon, and that in the Corvallis area. And I won't name it because I was super unhappy, and but it was fate, I think, because it gave me a real kick in the butt to be like, let's do it. Let's do this on our own. I quit before harvest started, and that way we were able to start Spearhunter in 2022.
Yeah, and definitely for the better. I think like my satisfaction and happiness with wine definitely was like reborn by doing it for ourselves. And it's not to say like we didn't know anything, right? Like we had 2 master's degrees, like 15 vintages or something at that point, 14 vintages. So we had done a lot of work in winemaking and felt confident that we were like, hey, we can start small. If it doesn't work out, like I'll drink it, you know, fine.
And we have amazing mentors all over the world now. You know, our first harvest, I was emailing the winemaker at La Fleuve, like, it came in at this and this, like, do you have any advice? And we were
Pinot, same deal. And like you can't pay for those consultants, you know what I mean? And then we ended up doing Albarino, and I'm like, well, I guess I got to call someone in Spain, you know, and like, not like I don't know anyone that doesn't make Albarino. So we had great help, like at least support, and people like kind of talking you off cliff a lot of times when you are like getting going on your startup. So
let's talk about Spearhunter then. Let's start with sort of the what did you want it to be? What was it? You obviously you had made a lot of wine in a lot of places for a lot of people in a lot of different styles. What was it that you wanted to bring forward in Spearhunter, and what was different as you started making your own decisions?
I think stylistically, I really liked. I feel like there's so many wines that are in the U.S. like overripe, coming from California, too high alcohol, where you can't get through a bottle without being like drunk. Yeah. And then you're like, and then also like over oaked. So I think that those were the couple of things that we wanted to avoid, right? Like we wanted to make wine that just in general is just drinkable. And
I'm actually not as picky. I always say David is like very unique in like every aspect, like, you know, except wine. Wine, he's like a traditional French man in Burgundy.
I'm like an old French man. Like I know what I like, and I want that. So I think that was just like the philosophy going forward. Like, let's be gentle with the
But yeah.
grapes. Let's get them so they're not going to like, I
We
don't
really
know,
wanted to
blow
show
your
the
liver
fruit.
out. Yeah.
You know, we want to make wine in Oregon to show the Oregon lifestyle, kind of. And that's why we went with our labels, you know, the scallop, the lingcod, and the elk. And I think, well, you really got us into fishing and hunting. So we go fishing a lot. We go scallop diving. We go elk hunting. Yeah, so I think, you know, we really wanted to make wine in Oregon for Oregon.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about having like a quote cool job, but I'd still rather be fishing. You know, like, it's just how it is. So yeah, we wanted to make good wines, and we think there's a lot more to offer here than like just wine itself. So when we actually made the first Chardonnay, it was COVID and picking up new hobbies like spearfishing, and like the lingcod's kind of the prize catch, and we got lingcod, and then we have like 2 barrels of Chardonnay to drink on our own. So we were drinking, we're like, this is really good together, you know, what do you know? And I think it's kind of like a mystery sometimes. People like put all this like fluff behind wine and what it's supposed to be and these pairings and tastings and stuff. We just want to make it obvious, like, hey, there's a fish on the label, and if you drink this bottle of wine with some fresh fish, you're gonna really enjoy it. And it's like taking the mystery out. And same with the scallop, like the Albarino is kind of like a fruity, towards a Sauvignon Blanc-y profile that we have. But yeah, the shellfish is just like fantastic. Like I said, I don't know how many people have elk in their freezer, but we have a lot of elk in our freezer. And the Pinot is really good with elk among almost any other thing you could.
If you don't have elk, you can, you know, eat other red meat too.
So that was kind of our thought too. And I think what's in the bottle is one thing and what's on the label is like another story, right? So the whole like someone putting their name on the wine is like, I think I kind of just got turned off on that working in like different
Everywhere.
wineries. Yeah, everywhere, honestly. And I was kind of like, it seems like I don't know, boisterous. Also, my last name is very hard to pronounce, so that was easy enough.
Well, and it's like, you know, all the breweries get the full, cool,
Yeah,
fun
that's a big
names.
deal,
It's like we
too.
wanted to be fun as
Yeah,
well.
breweries got,
And
like cool cans and like cool names and stuff, and everyone loves it. And they're like going for the weirder the better. And then it's like classic. Like, I mean, this is like not a slam on anybody that does it, but if you call your wine Domaine, Chateau, like we both worked in France a long time, and I've kind of like don't want to pretend I'm French, you know, like we're just not, you know, and
yeah, I'm from Lubbock, Texas, and
yeah,
you're
I
from
wanna express
Madison,
myself
Wisconsin.
and
So
not pretend to be something I'm not. And I think that was just our angle coming in, and we're both in our 30s, and we wanted to make it like cool, you know, but still the wine's phenomenal behind it, a cool bottle. It's not just some like frilly thing to catch your eye. So cool but classy. How do you ride the wine?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything to add about sort of the Spearhunter, sort of the ethos or the design behind Spearhunter?
Yeah, I remember us in California thinking about ideas for our future wine label, and it really was to create food-friendly wine, because I think that, at least for me, and I think for you too, we love wine because usually you're sitting around your dinner table sharing it with your family and friends. And so we really want to make food-friendly wine. Like David said, you know, we're making it easy for you with the scallop, the fish, and the elk on the bottles. And coming from, you know, I guess the engineering background too, and the environmental engineering background, we want to make it as, you know, as environmentally friendly as wine can be. So we do aim to kind of do that with our vineyard choices, and then you'll notice, you know, no capsule on the bottle, and that's just because it's just trash. It goes in the garbage, it goes to the dump. And I think it, you know, really looks nice without it, and yeah.
Tell me about finding your first fruit.
Yeah, well, I think like we said, we wanted to start small, right? Because if it doesn't sell, you gotta drink it. And then again, into our winemaking philosophy, we're like, let's make wines that we like. You know, I don't want to make something I don't like, because then once I'm not a salesman, right? And that became apparent somewhat recently, but I'm learning. And like, if you go around and you're like, I really like it, our sales pitch is like, if you don't like it, that's fine. Like everyone has their own
We'll
taste.
drink it ourselves.
I'll drink it. Like I love it.
Yeah.
And that's what our thought was. But our first vintage, we're like, let's start small, Pinot and Chardonnay, right? Like that was the whole like the Chardonnay, the Pinot. Let's do it. Let's get our hands on a ton of fruit each, and see what we can do. 2022, our first vintage, was a very difficult year for Chardonnay because of late frost, and especially when we went by a ton. So I don't know how flexible a lot of growers will be with that. Some will be nice and like, or some will be like, yeah, you have to do it, but we're picking a large block and you just get it this day.
Yeah, and honestly,
which is fine.
Money was a constraint as well. So we
Definitely.
were kind of looking in Southern Oregon originally, thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be like more affordable, and but then that didn't work out. And the Pinot, we were still looking, and we got lucky with the Ribbon Ridge fruit. I mean, it was a little bit more expensive than we originally
it was
thought,
like
but
proposed to be a little bit more expensive, then a bit more expensive, and then by the time we got the bill, we were like, I'm sorry, I guess we need a contract in the future. But happy we were able to start out with that. And then the Chardonnay, we were lucky just looking on the Willamette Valley collaboration space and just throwing out like, hey, just a
I was like in search of Chardonnay, and Chris Baker at Wheatland Vineyard. Well, I guess he makes his own wine for Naked Wines, but he reached out and said, hey, I could sell you a ton of Chardonnay. So that's how we found the Chardonnay. And like I said, with the Pinot, we just got super lucky. The Fullerton winery brings in Ribbon Ridge fruit, and they said they could sell us a ton of, from there.
Yeah, there's no shortage of Pinot
so.
around. And I think we were fortunate to end up with what we did because this was our first, we had moved in February, and then our first vintage was that October. So we were still really feeling our way out, like learning what's what, who's where, who are these people, or like name dropping people. I don't know anybody. And we had finalized Fullertons were like, yeah, make wine here, sounds good. Okay, we got that set. Now we need to find barrels. We scramble a little bit to get ready. But yeah, like I said, we started small, we started manageable, and we were able to take a ton of care and probably way more time spent on it than most people spend on a little 2-ton batch. But at that point, that was all of our savings that we put into it, between the crush fee, the barrels, the startup costs, the grapes, the transportation, every other thing you put into it.
The glass, the cork.
So kind of didn't want it to go bad. And then so that's the 2022 wines, was just those two. The Albarino we added the next year, which actually came from it comes from the Columbia Valley, right outside the Columbia Gorge, and that came from people that we had reached out to about buying Chardonnay. The following year, we're like, hey, we have extra Chardonnay this year. Do you want it? And we were like, well, we have Chardonnay now, but you have Albarino. What's the deal with that? Because we had our two Pinot and Chardonnay, and you kind of look around and everyone else was making Pinot and Chardonnay. And we had this weird connection to Spain and kind of passion for Spanish wines, a little bit off the beaten path, but maybe rising in popularity. And they just happened to have Albarino, and they were kind of yeah, the guy that's been buying it hasn't paying his bills, and fine, you can have it. And we're like, great. And they're like, it's ready now. And we're like,
pick it up.
What? Okay, so scramble. But I guess that's just kind of I would say, how winemaking's been. You just kind of roll with the punches and do the best you can with what you got. And
I keep saying luck, but what is the saying? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that kind of is what happened with all of our grapes, but especially the Albarino, because I think the Albarino is so delicious, and the vineyard that we get it from, they take great care. They're super knowledgeable. He actually has he has a lot of varieties. I don't know how many, but super weird ones that I had never even heard of. So yeah, I think we got lucky, but we were prepared.
Yeah, and I think we got lucky with all of our fruit. We found people that really take care of their vineyards, and rolling the dice a little bit on what you get your first vintage. If you end up with some bad fruit, you could pretty quickly think that you just are not good at what you do, and it's well, I guess we got lucky in that regard. And went from Albarino, and then we're adding Tempranillo for the same reason.
And that was kind of another
Due to
funny
Spanish.
story is I was down in Southern Oregon and we went to, with some of my girlfriends, and we were out wine tasting, and we went to Valley View Vineyards and I tasted the Tempranillo, and we had actually been talking about adding Tempranillo. And I was like, this is really good Tempranillo. And the winemaker came over to talk to us because we were all kind of like in the wine industry, or were in the wine industry. And I'm like, do you ever sell your fruit? And he's like, well, not really, but we might consider it. So he gave me his card. And then, a couple of months down the road, I emailed him and was like, hey, I tasted your Tempranillo. I loved it. And me and my partner, David, we do this and this, and really be interested in adding Tempranillo, and I think your fruit would be perfect. And then the owner emailed us back and said, yeah, like, we normally don't do this, but sure, why not?
And this is like estate, ungrafted, 40-year-old
Yeah.
vines. Like how
Yeah.
did we end up with that? I don't know.
So.
And it's looking super, super good. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, I guess that's quick run through 3 vintages, really fast there. But
So tell me about what it's like making the decisions. Now you're making you are choosing the grapes. You are making all the calls. What's it like? How has it been like? And how has it? I guess how have you evolved in your winemaking in the short time?
more relaxed.
Yeah, we are definitely more relaxed than the
one
first
is, like,
vintage.
every day is stressful because you're like, it's gone bad, dump it out. Like all our money, start over. What am I gonna do? Terrible winemaker, and then we
Yeah.
we bottled the wines and like have been just incredibly pleased. We've gotten like very high praise for them, thankfully, and like are very grateful for all of that. But
it
that's
is
very
different.
motivating and
Very different making the decisions for ourselves. I think, well, with the Pinot, we make it like Armand Rousseau, and the Chardonnay, we make it like Domaine Leflevre, and with the Albarino, we kind of had to think about what we were going to do with it.
make it like Pago de Tarsis in Spain.
Exactly. But an Oregon version, and we had to think like what we were going to do. And then the Tempranillo this year, we really had to decide, okay, what are we going to do? How many punch downs? How many pump overs? How long an oak? And so I think, but it's nice because we're both on the same page normally about what type of wine we want to make and where we want to go with it.
Yeah, and that first vintage was stressful, but I think we are on such the same page that we're able to we trust each other. We have similar tastes. Like if I can't go in 1 day or 2 days, or Victoria can't go, like completely trust her to do what's best, and she always does. So it's been great to work as a team.
The winemaking's been the easy part of Spearhunter, honestly, because we both are so experienced in the winemaking side, but the marketing, sales,
Web design, accounting, finance,
yeah, that's the hard part.
That was my next question. So just roll with that. Tell us about all the non-winemaking parts of winemaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a learning experience. So we got our permit in July of 2024. So we were like, let's start selling in July.
Or just dying to make $1 back, right? You were
Yeah.
like 2 years of shoveling money into the furnace, right? Is what it feels like. And you're like, what? Well, all I have is wine, I'm like wine rich, I guess. I don't know. So
But we quickly learned that was probably not the best idea because you can't ship anywhere. And I'm from Texas, David's from Wisconsin, so all our friends and family who wanted to order wine, who had been hearing about Spearhunter for 2 years, we couldn't ship it to them.
it's available, not for you.
They could order it, but they couldn't get it yet. So that was a learning experience. I mean, like even the labels, creating the labels, going through the TTB and the Oregon liquor license, that's just all been a learning experience. But I would say sales is definitely the hardest part for us.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of upfront costs, right? Like when you do your first label, do you want your font raised or the high gloss build? Well, that's pretty cool. And I was like, it's $900. And you're like, make my letters stick out? Really? Or you want your cork to have your name on it? Yeah, let's do that. Okay, $1,000, and you're like, what? Like,
But we want it to look
understand
nice.
how it works, but it just, it felt like everything was like getting kicked in the shins. So second vintage, third vintage, just like some of that's behind you, you're prepared. Nobody really like tells you this stuff up front. So
Yeah, and I think being smaller is a bit harder. I think there's just less channels for you to go through to sell your wine. And yeah, it's just us two. We're just doing it on our own and learning as we go.
yeah, and when you're small batch, like I think it's like buying craft beer versus like buying big brand beer. Like your margins are totally different. For places that you can get cheap, like people in Wisconsin would be like, my friends there, we just got back from delivering a ton of wine, and they're like, it's pretty expensive. It's like, well, if we made like 50 cents a bottle margin, like you would have one bottle of wine, and then that would be it because we'd be done, and just kind of like learning the business and finance, which has been awesome, honestly. I love learning new stuff, and it's been a great experience, but yeah, just uncovering the next thing one after another.
I know, and this will be our first tax season where we actually made money. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's made money to pay taxes.
Yeah.
It's always something.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah, it is, but I don't know. It's been an adventure, and I think it's like been a really, again, back to the beginning, satisfying thing to do, and I'm happy.
We go through ups and downs. Sometimes we're like, why are we doing this?
The love-hate is just insane, but
And then last night we came in and we kind of, we were topping our wines and tasting, and we were all, I was really excited. I'm like, oh, these are tasting so good. And so, yeah, definitely ups and downs, but worth it.
Well, let's talk about selling wine as long as we're talking about selling wine. Tell me about how you've gone about it so far, what successes you've seen, and maybe the future as your brand grows, what you're seeing in terms of selling wine.
I think the biggest thing for us was when we opened our first couple of bottles and just poured them at the winery. I think people were like, that's really good. You guys, you should submit them to get them reviewed. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just like, I don't believe in the rating system. It's all a sham, okay, fine, whatever. I guess we got to do something. We submitted them, and I guess.
Little did we know Michael Alberti was rating our wines for wine enthusiasts.
Yeah, and he rated them, sent us back the reviews, rated them very well, and but then I got a call from a Portland number. And this is in July when we're like, let's sell wine. It's boiling hot. Who wants a bottle? You gotta come pick it up at our front door and put it in your cooler on the way home. And he's called me from a Portland number. He's like, hey, it's Michael from Wine Enthusiast. I'd love to do an interview on you guys and publish you in the Oregonian. And I was like, for what? And I was like, what's this about? And I was like, oh, you're the guy that reviewed our wines. This is okay. Yeah, sounds good. And he wrote a super nice article about us. Really had great things to say about our wine. And that has been the biggest help, because I think it legitimizes you.
Yeah.
I take back what I said about the reviewers, the great people.
That really was a big surprise and success, because after that article, we had people we didn't know reaching out to us. Before, it had been family and friends or friends of family, reaching out and buying our wines. But after that article came out, we were like, oh, you want to buy our wines? We don't know you. Okay.
Yeah, and he asked the same question, how's selling been going? It's well, we released our wine a week ago. You were the first one to taste it. So, okay. I don't know. But yeah, that's been really good. And then it legitimized us a lot, where we had a lot of people oh, David and Victoria have some homemade wine. And it's not really the image we're going for. Too, wow, people it's published and they getting reviewed and they're in the newspaper, and then you're like, see, other people think it's good too. It's not just us. So.
Yeah, and I guess when I say selling is hard, it is because we have full-time jobs besides winemaking.
Yeah, it may come as a shocker, but 2 years of dumping all your savings into your, what I call an expensive grape hobby, would not be a great financial plan. So we did end up doing, Victoria has a property management business that she purchased and actually runs to finance a lot of the winemaking. And then I do some government subcontracting, kind of part-time, to keep us afloat in the meantime. But
Yeah. I said I always wanted to own a business, and now I own two. So.
Sometimes it ends up being a little bit busy, and like I said, if we're fortunate, we can cover for each other and trust each other 100%. I mean, that makes a huge difference and has made things better for us.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the definition of being a celebrity is now people know you and they call you and you don't know them.
Yeah.
So you guys you're now wine celebrities.
Oh, good.
Weird, right? Like I still think of myself as just like, why would someone want to talk to me? Like when you reach out, I'm like, what are you going to talk to me about? You know, and then you tell a story and I'm kind of like, yeah, I guess that is like, that was a little unique in some areas. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I really enjoy our wines, so I really do get excited when I'm like, oh, you're gonna buy our wine? Great, like, you know, eat it with this. And
the hardest part is not drinking it all, honestly. Like, you got access to all this wine and you're like, what should we have for dinner tonight? We got like all these wines we've collected from all over the place, or we could have the bottle that we custom made for our own taste that we really enjoy, like, and we have a palate of it. So
yeah, and I mean, I know we've said this before, but our wines are very, very food friendly. So you can pair it with just a variety of different meals. You don't have to, you know, just eat shellfish with Albarino or whitefish with the Chardonnay. You know, and we cook a lot, so every, you know, not every night, but a lot of nights we'll cook up this, you know, gourmet meal, and we're like, what should we drink with this? Well, the Chardonnay or the Pinot, you know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the space here. Obviously, you mentioned you've been at Fullerton making wine here. Tell me, we talked a little bit before the interview, but tell me about the shared space and about working in a place like this, how that's gone for you, and taking that to kind of its next step. What is the next step for you as you grow?
I think working in a shared facility like this has been great for us for many reasons. One is we both work remotely in our other jobs. So coming into a shared space, it's like these are our coworkers, and we get to mingle and have fun, and they're all really down-to-earth people here. So it's been great. So Dacha and Antiquum and Fullerton are all here. And we also get to ask them for help, you know, like bounce ideas off of each other and just taste great wine with each other too. So I think it's been really fun. There are challenges, you know, in a shared facility trying to find your space and share all of the equipment, but
yeah, I would say overwhelmingly good. We're with like super friendly people. It's been a positive experience. I did mention I'd fire me, but it's like going to work, but I can't get fired. You know, it's like I'm paying to be here. So no, I think they enjoy having us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like obviously you learn to share. Sometimes you come in and you're like, oh, all the pumps are in use, and like, what are you guys doing? Oh, you have like 10 pump overs left. Okay, so it's gonna be like 3 p.m. I got stuff to do, you know, like got a lot going on. But it's just life, you know, it's no big deal. And we're like not so anal about the wines where we're like, I have to do everything exactly like, you know, it's a plan and you're ruining my life by like blocking what I'm doing. And because I think there are people that are out there like that and they're like crazy about it. And it's like, wine's gonna be fine. Maybe that's the French attitude. Like you're not the yeast, man. Like,
yeah, and Spanish.
And Spanish too, yeah, big time. Same kind of like old world, you know, like the wine eventually will make itself if you let it. We're not that hands off, obviously. We take very good care of it.
Yeah, I would say overwhelmingly positive, and for the future, I see us just continuing to make wine here. As I said, there's challenges having a small wine label and you know, buying all of that equipment. I just don't see us wanting to do that and being able to do that in the future. So I think for now, we just continue to enjoy making wine here.
Yeah.
With other very knowledgeable people.
Mm-hmm.
So what, do you have a goal in mind for the future of the brand? Is there a size you're looking for? Are there a number of varietals? Is there a kind of an endpoint to where you'd like to be?
I I don't know if it's like the winemaker's burden where you like look at stuff and you're like, you know, it would be awesome to make this year's like a semi-sweet like Riesling with like super low pH and we'll like age it for 10 years and we're gonna do sparkling that's like on lees for 5 years and like all this stuff and you're like, cause I wanna drink it, right? But you're like balancing that with the like, we have to sell these, David. Okay, yeah, like, so I think being at our 2 Burgundy varieties and then our 2 Spanish varieties is like a great spot for us. We're super happy with that. Gonna definitely like keep an eye on the like vineyards, fruit quality, make sure everything stays good. I think we'd be more comfortable scaling up in volume. Like we are currently making more Pinot because the Pinot's been very well received and much easier to sell than we expected. I think the Tempranillo will be a lot like that too, but yeah, 2 reds, 2 whites feels like a very good balance.
Yeah, we've over doubled in tonnage in 2 years. So I think for now we kind of just want to balance everything out, really, you know, learn the other parts of the business and then maybe someday we'll start doing those fun different varieties and yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about our philosophy. We kind of explained like, I know how margins work and the viability of your business and you gotta stay afloat, you gotta make money if you wanna keep doing it, but I would rather continue to make a small amount of very good wines than try to like dilute your brand or like have an offshoot brand where you can make like, you know, several thousand bottles that you can sell cheaply and quickly type of thing.
Yeah. And I think the wine industry might be getting a little bit more expensive here in the future and to make wine and so we're just gonna
right?
a lot of unknowns, so.
Yeah, starting to make wine in like the highest inflationary period where your business model is literally like 2022, buy all these grapes, put them in barrel and then like you can't sell them for 2 years. Well, it's like if we wanted to sell them for $40, like your consumer price index is like now it's $45 and you're making essentially the same buying power back, but like trying to sell something for $45 when the consumer's not prepared to pay that and there's huge downward pressure with the amount of wine that's out there. It's a challenge, you know, especially for small people getting started, and that's why I like having these interviews like this, some exposure, people that can get our name out there is super helpful and makes a big difference for us in allowing us to like overall continue to do what we enjoy. Right?
Yeah, we want to keep it at a size where we still love doing it, you know, and are making the highest quality product that we can make. So
let's talk about the Oregon wine industry a little bit at a kind of a higher level here. So tell me about initial impressions of Oregon wine, of the people here and the wines they're making. And you mentioned some of obviously the challenges in wine right now. Tell me about, as you look ahead, what does the future look like for the industry?
I think when we decided to move here, we were like largely unversed in Oregon wines. So we're like, let's buy a handful of what we could get. I think we were in Maryland, where my parents live now. So what could reach the East Coast, right? So like, what can we get there?
It was a handful. Arath, probably Argyle.
Yeah, some of the big boys, right? And we were just trying, and we bought like 5 of them. So we bought a bunch of money worth of wine, and we tried them, and we're just like, the floor is very high there, and that's very nice to see, because I want to live in a place where I can enjoy just drinking wine. Like, you don't have to go ball out for the highest or the most expensive to get something that you actually enjoy drinking. And I think that's been like super refreshing and nice, and I think that speaks volumes to the quality of like
the fruit
and the winemaking and the philosophy here as well. It's just like it's just a lot of wine that's well made here, which is cool.
The bar is high here, I think.
About like friendly competition, like I know they're your competition, but it's like the rise and sea lifts the boat. That's what happened in Burgundy. You know, like people go buy stuff just because the label says Gevrey Chambertin on it, and like don't even know the producer. Well, it's like, we got some ribbon-rich fruit, and I think we like did it justice. Well, that is a reputable place, and I think another testament to the Oregon wine industry is when looking at entering into Napa, floors are already so high. You can't find good fruit, get a label out there. Your costs are so high. You got to be selling these bottles for like a super high price. Whereas we kind of looked at the Willamette Valley. Okay, you got national name recognition with Willamette, high quality fruit, French people like go there. They're also coming here, right? Like we are the big unknown that came from France to start a winery here, right? Along with Jadot and all those other people. So same. And I think like we kind of saw it as a launch pad, like, grab onto the ship that's taking off versus trying to catch one that's already way out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, I still love that there are still small wineries here, and you can, drive down the road and go into a winery, and it's basically a mom and pop,
Yeah.
in the tasting room and serving the wine. And but and I say this about kind of Oregon in general, and not that I want it to happen, but I do think Oregon is kind of going to be the next place to be.
Yeah, we always say like, look around. Why would you not want to be here? It's awesome.
So.
Yeah, sorry. It sucks. It rains all the time.
Yeah.
Like, am I doing it right? Okay.
Yeah.
We're super happy. We love the rain.
Yeah,
way better than Wisconsin. It was like 40 below when we were there, right? Like winter's fine.
Well, and I'm from Lubbock, which is like flat, brown, windy, no trees. So I just enjoy it being green year round. So, but yeah, it rains too much. Don't come here.
But yeah, you mentioned the future of the wine industry, and we kind of talked about this on the way over. Not being from here for too long and just kind of like getting started, you can kind of see like, there's some costs that I think are going to continue to go up in the future, and we're already seeing that. I kind of mentioned with like the inflation and how that's affected selling wine and getting started in a business, and just kind of costs of, you buy a lot of stuff. Like glass is like sand shipped from Egypt to China where it's melted and then sent over here. And then we have all sorts of like field labor that could get more expensive. And, that could make prices go up significantly for us. And then again, you're in an industry where these people that produce $1 million or a million bottles and they make $1.50 a bottle can afford to do that, whereas like small guys, I don't know if you're going to get like pressured out, or you're going to need that support of people that can look past the price of the bottle to support small business. Otherwise, you're going to definitely, I think, see consolidation with the big boys for worse, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you'll lose a lot of that small.
I hope that doesn't happen, but I think that's.
Yeah. And we're fortunate. When we got started, we talked about having like investors or taking outside money, and we were like, I don't want to do that, right? Like it would be hugely helpful. We could start off a lot bigger. Well, there's the risk side to it, right? Like we wanted to make sure we could do it and make good wine, but we're not beholden to anyone. Like we don't have to continue doing something a certain way, or we don't have outside people telling us what to do, what not to do.
We get to do what we want, and I think that is the goal, is, running our own business and making our own schedule, and
Yeah, definitely.
having the time to do what we love, which is enjoy Oregon by, hiking, hunting, fishing, going to the coast. So going to Bend where we were the first time we ever went to Oregon and fell in love with it. So
Yeah, all that being said, I hope that, people, I don't hope, I think the industry here will be totally fine in another aspect, that there's a lot of people looking to come here. Like we're not the only ones. And I don't think that was the case talking to other winemakers. People have been here since the 70s, you go in, it wasn't a thing to come to Oregon to start your wine label. And now you have people like us, obviously we're like not from here, forgive us. But we love it, and we've made it our home, and we came here for wine. And I think we tell people how many people came here for Pinot. And it's I think more and more people are. Yeah. I think that's a good thing that will bring that type of funding, financing, support to small producers, people looking for niche stuff, different types of products. You don't want a big homogenous batch of Willamette Valley Pinot being shipped out, and that's all people get.
Yeah.
Otherwise you end up being like Marlboro.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. I don't know, I really kind of on another topic, I really love being here in Corvallis, because you're still in the Willamette Valley, but you're not in that heart of wine country. So I don't know, you just get a more kind of variety of different people and different industries, and I love being located here in Corvallis. So.
Me too. Second that.
Anything else in your future, personally or professionally, that you're looking forward to? Anything else on the horizon that's exciting?
Well, I think we're both really excited about our Tempranillo. We tasted it last night, and it is tasting awesome. I mean, throughout harvest, every day we were just like, oh, this is so delicious. But it takes time, so we have to age it in barrel for a while. But I'm really excited about when that comes out and people get to taste that.
I'm glad you said something wine. I was going to say going to Vietnam. We're going to go to Vietnam.
Oh, well, yes.
I haven't been out of the country since 2021 when we took that trip because there's been like a lot of work done, which for how much I traveled and like all these different countries came here and like all of a sudden I just like never left. And spent a lot of time getting started on this. Like Victoria's business as well has taken a lot of time and effort and investment.
We travel around Oregon though. In Oregon, there's just so much to see and do, so.
Yeah. And I think that's very important for us. We are like big work-life people. I think you gotta like continue to enjoy your life while you do this type of stuff.
Going to Vietnam though.
Yeah.
When is that?
April.
Nice.
Yeah, I kind of figured it was a good time. We're gonna get the next batch of wines bottled like right at the end of March, and then you can't sell them. You get over the bottle shock period. Hey, what better time to go? And we're like, kind of good point in our life to take a big Asia trip like that. We haven't been, and it would be a different chunk of the world to explore.
So I've never been to Southeast Asia, so excited to eat our way through Vietnam.
Last question then. Biggest accomplishment, greatest achievement, what are you proudest of so far?
Getting started, honestly. I think a lot of people have trouble with just getting started on anything. So I think that's what I'm most proud of us for just doing it.
I'd say taking it like matters into our own hands, because I'm quite sure that if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have been in the wine industry. I had like big time burnout. There's like 5 harvests in 2.5 years. I was doing north, south, north. And then just like had some not so great experiences. A couple, personalities really turned me off. I mean, I obviously have a certain personality myself. So, just like that clashing. And like I said, I don't know that I would have like been a great employee in the wine industry, but now that we do it, I have no problem spending tons of time. I love it. Like I'm back, hands-on stuff, doing it for yourself. The passion's back, and I feel like we have a lot to contribute to the Oregon wine industry. So I'm proud that wasn't lost in that whole swing of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. All right. All the questions that I have. Anything I didn't ask?
I don't know. I think if that, like I said, I haven't been through my whole past like that in a long time. So that was, hopefully it wasn't too long. Someone will listen through it someday.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your
it was a pleasure for both of us. We really appreciate it.
Reaching out. This was a lot of fun.
Good. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Let you off the hook.